wanted to start off with just you explaining why you're running for Iowa's 3rd congressional seat.
Sure. I love this country. I mean, so much so that at 17 years old, I enlisted in the Iowa Army National Guard. I wanted to give back to the community that gave my family so much. I wanted to protect that community. And so for 8 years, I served in the military, including a deployment to Afghanistan in 2004. When I came home, I had a chance to serve this country again. I went on to USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture, for 10 years, working with our farmers and especially our veterans. I'm ready right now to represent Iowa's 3rd District. I have worked on delivering for our community and our state for a long time. I'm ready to go to Congress to make sure we fight for working families, our seniors, and our small businesses. My focus is clear. I will pass a Women's Health Protection Act to return the rights found under Roe v. Wade for women to make their own healthcare decisions again. That's critically important here for us to do. We also need to make sure that we find ways to save money for our working families and our seniors. That means going after big companies who are price gouging Iowans, making sure we also find ways to lower costs for housing, and making sure that we protect Social Security and Medicare. Those are the things I'm going to focus on when I'm in Congress.
And so you've talked a lot about your experience at the USDA. How do you feel that experience would help you represent the 3rd District?
I think this is incredibly important here. Having had a chance to work on programs that we've deployed all over our country and right here in the 3rd District, knowing that there are infrastructure programs that can upgrade our water and wastewater facilities, that there are rural development programs that can continue to expand access to high-speed internet, the fact that I understand the programs that our farmers and ranchers rely on, ways to get our veterans who are transitioning out of the military into careers in agriculture. We have an incredible opportunity here. I understand the USDA in ways that will help me be a better legislator, help me understand how we can craft legislation in order for us to maximize the amount of investment we can get back here in Iowa, right here in the 3rd District. That's really critically important for us to do, is to focus on the people in this district and in this state, and I will do that.
And back when we talked in June, you said that one of the first pieces of legislation that you'd like to see passed is that farm bill. Mm-hmm. Congress again recessed without passing a new one. They just passed a continuing resolution to keep the government funded. Mm-hmm. How important is it to you to get a new farm bill funded, and what specifics are you hoping to keep in there, add in there? What do the farmers need?
Well, this is really, really important for Iowans and farmers all across the country. And not just our farmers, but our rural communities and our nutrition advocates as well. This is a bipartisan piece of legislation historically. And unfortunately, what we've seen with Zach Nunn in charge here, that bipartisanship is out the window. This bill should have been passed. He let it expire once already before, and then he let the extension expire as well. He's let the Farm Bill expire twice. He's failed to do his job on the Ag Committee to get this passed. We need this now. It's really, really important for us to get the Farm Bill passed, because farmers are going to rely on the programs that come out of the Farm Bill to make their decisions about their own businesses. And as we see coming into the end of this year, farmers are finishing up their harvest, and they're planning for their next season already. Like, we have to make sure this Farm Bill gets done, and it gets done in a way where folks from both sides of the aisle come together to make it happen. And I will do that when I get to Congress.
And we know some farmers here in the state are struggling, especially with not having an updated Farm Bill. What are you hearing from farmers that they would mm-hmm. like to see fixed?
Well, there's no question that we need to continue to have a strong safety net program coming out of the Farm Bill for our farmers and ranchers. This is inherently risky business. The way farmers will make their decisions on how they run their businesses, by no fault of their own, like we saw up in northwest Iowa, we could have historic floods, or like we've seen here in the 3rd District, tornadoes all across Iowa, 122 tornadoes this year alone. Those weather events can destroy a farmer's investment. That's why it's important for us to make sure we maintain a strong safety net system within that Farm Bill. We also need to make sure we focus in on and support the nutrition programs as well. That's really, really important for us to do, because that allows us to bring folks from both sides of the aisle together in order to get the Farm Bill done. I will support both.
And inflation is another thing that many families around the third district are feeling the impact of. Republicans continue to point to Biden's policies. Do you feel this is accurate, and what do you think a solution is?
So I've traveled to all 21 counties, many of them multiple times. I've spent a lot of time listening and learning from Iowans, hearing about the issues that matter to them. And this is really, really important. I have seen and I have heard from Iowans that, yeah, okay, grocery prices continue to be high. It's a pinch to fill up your gas tank when you go to the gas station. Housing prices have elevated to be one of the top issues that folks continue to talk about. That's why it's important for us to do things that matter for our working families, our seniors, and our small businesses. That's why we have to make sure we go after those price gouging corporations who are making billions of dollars off of us and never passing down the savings to the customers. That's wrong. We should also make sure we find ways to lower housing costs. No question that we see families who want to be able to establish roots right here in Iowa. We should make that easier for them to do that by lowering housing costs, finding ways to do that. And of course, costs in terms of prescription drugs too. Medicare has the ability to negotiate for 10 drugs right now. Zach Nunn is part of a group in DC trying to repeal the ability of Medicare to negotiate for these 10 drugs. These 10 drugs will save seniors billions of dollars. And so many seniors are going to rely on it right here in Iowa's 3rd district, my dad included. And it's really sad to see that for my dad, who just over a year ago suffered a stroke, he's okay now, but he quit taking one of his drugs. He didn't tell any of us. He didn't tell me, he didn't tell my sisters. But he quit taking his heart medication because it was too expensive. And it led to a stroke. People are making life and death decisions based on what they can afford. And for the fact that Zach Nunn wants to repeal the ability of Medicare to negotiate for those 10 drugs, this is what's going to happen to folks. My dad is on one of those medications Medicare can negotiate for now, and it's 53% less than what it was before. We need to make sure we find ways for our families and our seniors and our small businesses to save money.
One of the things we've seen a lot over the last 2 years specifically is the Biden administration's goal of student loan forgiveness. We have seen that held up in the courts. I was curious what your thoughts are on student loan forgiveness.
Oh, I think there are better ways for us to make college more affordable. I grew up in a small town, Mount Pleasant, Iowa, and I'm a public school kid. I went to community college for a while to help make sure I could afford going to college. I enlisted in the military as well, and so I had the ability to use the GI Bill. We should be thinking about ways to make college more affordable and get to that root cause. We should also expand Pell Grants here for folks who actually need the support to get into college education. I think those are paths in which we can take that I would agree with more.
For sure. So just to clarify, you don't agree with the student loan forgiveness?
I think there are better ways for us to make college more affordable.
For sure. Another thing, and I think you brought this up in the KCCI debate recently, when talking about keeping students safe and things like that, you brought up the red flag laws. A concern that we've heard about that, is the fear that it could impose on somebody's Second Amendment rights. Why would you support a red flag law, and do you feel like it would infringe on the Second Amendment rights?
So, I went to public school. My daughter's in the 4th grade now. She's in a public school. And for every single parent in this country who has a kid in school, for every person who's worried about their community and crime, we have to find a way to make sure that folks feel comfortable and safe in our communities. That means supporting our local police, making sure they have the funding that they need in order to do their jobs, to get the training and equipment, to keep our communities safe. That's really critically important here, but also making their jobs easier too. Let's make sure we find ways to make investments into the spaces where there are complementary support systems. Mental health services need help in Iowa. We're towards the bottom in the country when it comes to that. We need to find ways to increase more affordable housing. People who are unhoused are often find themselves in challenging situations. We need to find ways to get more folks in homes. We need to find ways to also alert our law enforcement to people who may have ill intents. That's why it's important for us to have a inability to have red flag laws. Violent history checks are important. These are widely supported by Americans all across the country, widely supported. And those are ways in which we can keep our communities safe. And the reality is, for the vast majority of gun owners in our country, they are responsible gun owners who understand what their guns and safety can do for our country. So we need to make sure that we protect that Second Amendment too. I'm all for that.
For sure. And another issue that you mentioned at the beginning was abortion. You've talked about wanting to codify Roe v. Wade and the Women's Health Act. I can't remember exactly the name of that. I was curious. In 2022 we also saw abortion from Democrats being a big issue here in Iowa, but we saw a red wave. What do you feel is different this cycle around compared to 2022? That you feel you could be successful on this issue.
Well, there's no question that the abortion ban we have here in Iowa is exactly what Zach Nunn wanted. He's worked his entire political career, every single year, voting for or supporting some form of an abortion ban or some bill that could threaten access to contraception or IVF. He has made it his mission to take away a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. That is the fundamental question here. Who gets to make the decision? This is a deeply personal thing. A woman should have the ability to make decisions about her own body in consultation with her family and her doctors. That's it. And the reality is, here in Iowa, the abortion ban we see that went into effect earlier this summer, that is now real for Iowans all across the state. The abortion ban that Zach Nunn fought for and he got, this is exactly what he wanted. And that's why it's so much more real this cycle than it has ever been before. And people are tired of it. Women want to have their rights back. We need to restore the rights found under Roe versus Wade, and I'm the only person in this race who will fight to vote for the Women's Health Protection Act to restore those rights back to women. I will do that when I get to Congress.
And do you think the issue of abortion will be enough to get voters energized and head to the polls this time?
I think it's pretty clear that we see multiple things happening here. That Zach Nunn, who spent his political career in Iowa trying to ban abortion, got that done. Zach Nunn, who laid the groundwork for the school voucher bill here in Iowa and voted for it, wants to take that model to DC and expand it across the country. He wants to take the things that he has done here in the state, things that Iowans just disagree with, and he wants to implement them on a nationwide basis. I think that is why Iowans are fired up this cycle, because they know Iowans who have on our flag, it says, our liberties we prize, our rights we will maintain. Well, our rights are being taken away. On our state quarter, foundation in education, well, our education system is no longer top in the nation, thanks to the stuff that Zach Nunn continues to do. Those are the reasons why Iowans are ready for change, and they know that I have dedicated my life to service in this country, from 8 years in the military to 10 years working at USDA. They know I'm ready right now to represent us in the 3rd District.
And obviously a lot of those education issues are happening here in the state legislature. Are there any thoughts of anything that you think you could do in Congress to help education? Sure.
I think there's a couple things that are clear here. I mean, Zach Nunn's part of this group in Washington, D.C. He's a politician. He joined this group, and in addition to trying to repeal Medicare's ability to negotiate for those 10 drugs, well, they would also propose eliminating the Department of Education. He's also voted for bills that could decimate public education, that could lead to 145,000 teachers losing their jobs in this country. Those are extreme positions to take. And these are not positions that Iowans agree with. Iowans want to see an investment in our public education again. Iowans want to see us as a state enroll in the summer EBT program. When 245,000 kids could have been fed, this state decided that it wasn't in our interest to do that. That's wrong. Zach Nunn, who sits on the Ag Committee, should have led, should have said, should have advocated for us as a state to enroll in that program so those 240,000 kids would have been fed this summer.
And another issue, and I believe we touched on this back in June as well, where you've talked about not wanting to increase the age for Social Security, retirement, that sort of thing. But there have been concerns that Social Security won't be funded in the long run if we continue on the path that we are. So what are your thoughts on, making changes and what needs to change in that area?
Again, I mean, Zach Dunn's part of this political group in DC. He's a politician that wants to raise the Social Security retirement age to 70. And I think about this issue a lot because my mom and dad both worked at a factory for 25 years apiece, the McKay envelope factory in Mount Pleasant. And my mom operated a machine with dozens of other people who did the same thing. And they would stand at these machines and gather these envelopes, pack them in boxes, and stack these boxes on pallets. 40-pound boxes, stacking them on pallets till those boxes were taller than her. 10-hour shifts, sometimes 12-hour shifts. These are incredibly hard jobs, and I can't even imagine people who work for a living, Iowans who work in our factories, that we would ask them to wait 3 more years to get the benefits they earned. Well, that's wrong. We shouldn't be asking Iowans to work harder and longer and wait for the benefits that they paid into for their lifetimes in order for them to retire. The reality is we should protect Social Security, and we can find ways to keep it solvent. We can look at raising the cap on contributions on income for people who make over $400,000 a year. That's a way to keep it solvent for years to come. But again, what's also critically important here is that we protect Medicare too. And the ability of Medicare to negotiate for those 10 drugs, the ability for us to have a cap on out-of-pocket costs, the cap on $35 insulin, those things are all going to go away if Zach Nunn gets back in Congress. He will repeal all that from Medicare. And we need to make sure Medicare has the ability to operate and save Americans money by negotiating for those drug prices. That's really key here too.
And one of the things that you've said is that Republicans are playing political games whenever it comes to immigration, the southern border, in response to them not, passing the bipartisan immigration bill that we saw earlier. I was curious how you would work with Republicans, work across the aisle to get something passed to address the issue.
Sure. And again, this is another one of these things that Iowans are tired of. The political games that we continue to see when they want to go out and make this a political issue, yet they do nothing in Congress when they have the opportunity to do so. A bipartisan border security package supported by the Border Patrol agents, it would have added more agents at the border, it would have added more barriers where it was needed, it would have deployed smart technology to identify drugs like fentanyl, and it would have forced the president to shut down the border when it became overwhelmed. It would have put much needed resources and infused it into securing the border. Yet, for purely political purposes, Zach Nunn stood silently by as his party bosses killed the opportunity to get something done. That's the kind of politics people are tired of. I have a deep appreciation for understanding security here. I've spent 8 years in the military, including a deployment to Afghanistan in 2004. I served on a small provincial reconstruction team base. I know how important it is to make sure that we secure our borders, and we need to get that done first.
With how divisive the country is in regards to politics and stuff, how do you plan on working in a bipartisan manner to get some things like the Farm Bill, to get a border security bill over the finish line,
Sure.
past the House and the Senate?
That's a great question, and Iowans can sense and feel this too. And this, for me, is an incredible opportunity. For my entire life, for every single time I have served, from my 8 years in the Iowa Army National Guard, to my deployment in Afghanistan in 2004, to my 10 years working at USDA, helping our farmers, helping our veterans. Never once have I ever asked a person what their political background was. When you take that oath of office, you don't take an oath for a party. You don't take an oath for a person. You take an oath to defend the Constitution and our country. And that's the kind of approach I'm going to take when I go to Congress. I'm going to work with everyone to get things done for Iowa's 3rd District.
And I was curious if you've thought at all. So each representative, gets a certain amount of, projects they can fund through Congress earmarks, that sort of thing. I was curious if there's any exact projects you've seen, throughout your time on the 3rd District that could use improvements, could use that community improvement money.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's critically important for us to make sure that we continue to find ways to expand high-speed internet access all across the 3rd District. We need to continue to find ways to upgrade our infrastructure in our rural communities as well. And then here in Des Moines, let's make sure we find a way to finish off that new terminal at the airport. Those are big issues here. We also need to take a look at Highway 65. It would be great if we could turn that into an interstate. That would help us also increase our economic opportunities in and around that corridor. There's a lot we can do. We need to focus in on it and do this together, and I'm willing to make that happen.
Sure. Another big issue that we've seen, addressed at the Statehouse, but also, brought up in Congress is foreign land ownership. Especially here in Iowa, we have a lot of Iowa farmland. So I was curious what your thoughts are on that issue.
Sure. I don't think any of our global adversaries should be owning any of our land, especially some of our critical land that produces the food that we eat. And that goes for China, that goes for Russia, that goes for Iran. We need to make sure that our farmers and ranchers have certainty that the land that they have or they sell is going to stay in the hands that's going to be productive for Iowans and Americans, and especially for our economy as we continue to export the incredible goods that we raise and produce here in the state.
For sure. And just kind of my last thing, so obviously the District 3 race is one of the most competitive House races across the country. The Cook Political Report recently rated it to a toss-up. Mm-hmm. So I was curious what you feel Iowans are ready for, why you feel it's going to be different this time around, and how you're really reaching out to voters.
Sure. Well, as I started, I love this country. I love it deeply. My mom and dad instilled in me a love of country very early on. And that's because of what this state did for my parents. As refugees from Laos, they came here to Iowa because of a Republican governor, Bob Ray, and the community that embraced our family. This is a legacy that Iowans are incredibly proud of. And I am an Iowa story, growing up in a community that raised me, loving it so much that I wanted to give back. At 17 years old, I don't know how smart you were. I didn't know much about the world, but I knew I wanted to protect what we had in my hometown. I knew I wanted to protect the freedoms and liberties we have in this country. So at 17 years old, I took a recruiter home to my mom and dad. They co-signed my papers. I enlisted in the Iowa Army National Guard. And for 8 years, I served our country. And I served our country in a time of war as well, when I deployed to Afghanistan. And this is really key. These experiences have shaped my life. I believe in our country, I love our country, and I want to serve our country. And I have done it from my 8 years in the military to my 10 years working at USDA, deploying programs for our farmers, our ranchers, rural economic development, and especially helping our veterans find jobs. Those are all experiences that have given me a deeper perspective on what it means to serve our community. Iowans understand that. They know that. And they know I'm ready right now to serve Iowa in Congress here in the 3rd District.